You know it's Wednesday and you know what we do? Yes, Sustainability Connect right here on Icon Radio, your number one entertainment plug. And I'm your host, Wanjira Maganjo. And today being Wednesday, we hear that song by Jack Johnson, the three R's, that is reduce, reuse, and recycle. And you know that is what we're discussing. And today's guest is going to be helping us demystify the S in the ESG. And, we love it when you're part of the conversation. We love it when you talk to us on our social media platforms. That is on Icon Radio KE on on Instagram, on Facebook, and also stream us live on www.iconradio.co.ke. And remember, after this show, we're gonna have a live on YouTube, not a live, like a pre-recorded on Icon Radio. So make sure that you click subscribe, and so that you never miss a show on Icon Radio. So thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And remember, send us a short SMS. Tell us, what do you think of the show? And what we'll be discussing today is the S aspect of ESG. So remember that WhatsApp number is +254 788 380030. Karibu sana to Sustainability Connect. And right after this, we are getting into this discussion. Today, we're going to be discussing what a lot of companies need to incorporate into their sustainability plan. And, as Kenya continues to integrate into the global economy, the emphasis on social responsibility, especially in the ESG framework, is likely to grow. And this is driven by both internal developments and external pressures from the international stakeholders. But regardless of that, we need to start Kenyanizing some of these laws and some of these policies. And because they are, ESG affects the reputation of every company. So we need to know that regulatory compliance is important, risk management is important, and we just need to know, how to go about it. So today we are joined by our in-house. When I say in-house, it's because you're going to be hearing from Greenwave and Julie, Sharon, and Njoki for a very long time, because we love dealing with experts who are very aware of what is happening in the ESG space. So she's not somebody who's new, but she's somebody who's here to help us decode what the S means. And this is none other than Julie Mulindi. Karibu sana, Julie.
Asante sana.
Good to have back. Yeah, karibu sana. When we have our own, it's like we have our own in-house doctors. Like when we are sick, we are like, we need our doctor. So when we discovered that we need to demystify the ESG conversation, we decided, let's be strategic about it. Let's have proper conversation revolving about ESG and how we move. We just don't have like a one-day show and then we're done. So it's going to be a very long-term conversation. So they're going to be helping us demystify the whole ESG space and sphere. So thank you so much. And today we are going, like I said, the social aspect of it all. Julie, you being a lawyer, in the simplest term to a local mwananchi, just tell us what is ESG briefly and then why we are focusing on the S today.
Yes. Well, good to be back, Wanjira. Thank you so much. And maybe I'll just jump right in. So in terms of S, this is the human aspect of ESG.
The human aspect.
The human aspect. And here we focus on the social capital, in that it interrogates how businesses deal with the community, how they deal with the end users of their products. So how do consumers feel about the products and services that these businesses are offering? And it also focuses again on the internal. How are you working with your employees? How are your employees feeling about their business? Do they enjoy working here? Is the business representative of them in terms of diversity? Is it safe to work in your business? And this is quite critical because a statistic by ILO, which is the International Labour Organization, showed that many businesses are actually not safe, and it actually costs a lot of money, not only to businesses, but also stakeholders. We're also looking at your supply chains. For example, if I get the chicken, before I get the chicken, is this good chicken? What kind of farming is this chicken? Do you have child labor prevention, or are children taking care of my chicken? I mean, that's just an example, but people also want to understand in terms of your supply chain, are you respecting human rights? And because of that, yes, the S aspect covers various things. So it's employee rights, and that also includes work and health, safety, and now mental health.
Very, very key.
Very
Mental
key.
health.
Mental health.
Yeah.
And now it's also expanded to work-life balance. There's also now diversity and inclusion. There's data protection, which is under S. I think most people are not aware of that.
Yeah.
Consumer protection, because we also want to understand that whatever we are consuming is not only safe, but it's also accessible, it's affordable. So consumer protection also falls under the S aspect of ESG. I don't know if I mentioned human rights.
Yes.
Now. And that's just to name a few of the critical aspects of what ESG looks like. Sorry, the S
The
in
S aspect
ESG
of it.
looks like.
So where does diversity fall in?
Both. It falls under the social aspect, but also the human aspect. This the human aspect, the employee aspect, and also the social aspect. The employee aspect, because we have begun to get data that boards that are more diverse, meaning they have women, they have young people, and I'm happy to state that Icon Radio has very young people.
Very good points.
That young people, people with disabilities actually make better decisions because you're getting a lot of perspective. You're not having only a singular perspective, but also the consumers of those products and services want diversity reflected. So it's internal, but also external. And if you see in the West, companies, for example, like Nike, they want to be more representative of colored persons. And, as a result, we actually have a Kenyan who's really pushing that brand.
Yes. Yeah.
So diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just not making it a token. We're not just ticking it, but integrating it into the business of the company. And in that way, it also impacts the community, because the community that you're dealing with feels that they have a stake in the business and they want to contribute to the growth of the business. And a very good example of a company in which they are creating an impact by bringing marginalized persons into the business is equity through their, I think it's Fly with Wings program.
The equity program?
Yes, they take underdeserved, and actually they take deserved but underprivileged children, and they finance their education, and then later
integrate them
into the business.
Yeah.
As that's a very good example of a company which is doing ESG quite well, and how they are bringing in inclusion, because these are people who ordinarily would have not had an opportunity maybe to work with equity or even elsewhere, because they although they are deserved, they are underprivileged, and they are marginalized.
Wow. That's a pretty awesome example, because, especially for startups and SMEs, they're always thinking, when you're talking about ESG, it sounds like this big acronym that, big corporates needs to be doing it into the business and incorporating into the business. Yet it's just the simple stuff.
It really is. And another good example I can give is Safaricom with M-Pesa.
Yeah.
That's actually an innovation which came from focusing on the S.
Mhm.
How can we create a product which can make it more accessible to people who are ordinarily not banked? And if there is a case on S making money, it's definitely M-Pesa.
Yeah.
It was just trying to
Solve a particular problem.
solve a particular problem,
Yeah.
which is to improve financial inclusion.
Yeah.
And if you can see where Kenya was at that time, in terms of how many people were banked, how many people had access to financial services, and consider where Kenya is right now
Yeah.
with access to financial products and solutions,
Yeah.
it's a million years ahead.
Yeah.
That really is credit to Safaricom and efforts, not only by Safaricom, but other people to improve financial inclusion.
Social responsibility is something that corporates, like if you're coming up with an innovation or if you're coming up with a solution for the market, people first. That should be everyone's motto, like people first. You don't come and create your own products and then you decide this is it. You have to think, how does it affect the people and how do the people benefit from this? So I think the S aspect is the most crucial. Before you even talk about the environment and the governance, is like whatever problem that you're solving as an SME, who are you affecting?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I couldn't say that even.
That is amazing. So how does that now affect the company's overall sustainability and performance?
Well, that's a bit nuanced, and it's a very tough question. Now, because ESG in general, not only the social aspects, because ESG in general is very hard to measure, because there's no one legislation that affects it. In fact, if I could say, about 5,000 pieces of different legislation affects ESG. Yeah.
Wow. So that is locally or internationally?
Internationally, so globally, 5,000 different pieces of legislation touch on ESG. So it's very hard to come up with a standardized format. And as a result, it becomes very hard to measure the impact of ESG. While that's the case, increasingly, there are reporting mechanisms which have been adopted and which are now beginning to show the impact on performance of a company.
Oh, really?
So, yes.
This one's like reporting mechanisms. Maybe you can give us an example so that people can now understand what they need to do.
Exactly. So there's GRI, which is the Global Reporting Initiative, which focuses on framework in which regulators like. So, for example, the NSC and CMA guidelines in Kenya are they're GRI facing. And it's because this focuses generally on all stakeholders. And then you have the Sustainability Accounting, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which is SASB. And this usually influence investor decision making. So those are the two standards that have gained popularity. And I am hopeful in the next few years we'll be able to see how S aspects can be measured objectively. But as we wait on that, there's now data. And the most recent was from Morgan Stanley on the performance of companies considering social responsibility aspects. It has shown that companies which are more compliant with S are actually better to invest in. And that's why investors now not only, because initially the push was from private equity and venture capitalists, but now institutional investors want companies to comply with ESG as a whole, but also S. Why? Because it means you have less litigation risk. You don't have your employees going on strikes, which would affect business. You don't have a high reputational risk. So you are and not only that, you can talk about workplace safety. We're also talking about consumer protection. And I just want to highlight, I think it was last year, Coke had a product labeling case.
Yeah, so that case actually.
So that
and they were also here talking about, I think there is a by the way, but I saw them in court as well.
Yeah,
trying to stop a law, a policy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no legislation behind it. I think everyone can agree, but they're very keen on labeling and providing. I think it's calories and energy and all of that on plastic bottles, but not on glass bottles.
Oh,
and because it's not on glass bottle, that brought a whole issue. But it's going to cost them a tidy sum of money. The last time I had it was going to cost about $1 million to try and change the line to have labeling on the glass bottle.
Yeah.
But can you imagine, as an investor, you've invested in that and you've invested in a company, and because of some litigation, now the company has to look for additional amounts of money.
Yeah, speaking of Coca-Cola, I feel like they're going through a lot at the moment.
Yeah.
Because there was this post in the morning that I saw. They've been lobbying, attempts. They've been trying to stop the plastic
tax. Yes, I also saw it today.
And I'm thinking, there's what is this called? There's some social responsibility right there.
Of course, there's some social responsibility.
Because if you're producing it, then you should be able to make sure that it comes back to either, you should have a way of making sure that it comes back.
Of course, and I'll say this, am I supportive of the tax? I think, especially because of how much tax there's been, I'd say, yes, I support the tax, but I'm not so sure it would be good to do it right now. And I think there still needs to be more information. The plastic, I am aware that the plastic they use is recyclable, and they have been trying to make it cheaper, cleaner, and greener to recycle the plastic. Something interesting most people don't know is that it takes more effort to reuse bottle now than it does to reuse plastic. So what they should aim to do is to bring in the end user, because if no one disposes of plastic carelessly, then that means all of it goes back to Coke. And Coke is keen on reusing the plastic.
They have all these community associations, and they're like, collect them for us now. Please collect them. We'll pay you. We just make sure that you collect the bottles.
Yes. So going back to what I had stated is that it does make now good business sense, although the data is still coming in, but it does make good business sense to focus on the S aspect, because investors consider companies that are compliant with S to be less risky. Yes.
Okay. I'm thinking it's the case of you were talking about the case of the chicken and the egg a bit earlier, and you were thinking, right now, let's case study Coca-Cola. They're recycling. They're creating jobs for these people who are collecting the plastics. There's proper channels, because now that becomes another different business aspect for them. So how do businesses now look at it from a perspective of our core mandate and our core business is producing soda? So how do we make that shift to having another side business of collecting plastic? Or how do they integrate this into their business strategy?
Okay. Well, that's a very good question. Well, I think it starts with understanding what your social impact is to the society. Once you understand, and you have to also understand what gaps do we have and how can we improve that. And how do you do that? I think either you will need to engage a sustainability expert or an ESG expert who can come and tell you, well, we've gone through your business, and in terms of the S aspect, this is where you are. And why is that important? Because that means you're making data-driven decisions.
Yeah.
You're just not shooting from the hip, doing things which are quite immaterial to your business, to the impact that you have on the business. And now what that means is that you start to implement plans which make sense to your business. And it's more of a marathon than a sprint. There's a way you've been running your business, for example, Coca-Cola. We started selling, our main focus is selling beverages, not only soda, but different kinds of beverages to consumers. Our consumers, who are also sophisticated, actually like plastic bottles.
Yeah.
And I can say at least most people find plastic bottles convenient. You can throw it in your bag, you can carry it with you, you can open it and then close it, and like probably the convenience that you have with a glass bottle.
Yeah.
So they do like that product. So you go thinking, well, we have our consumers who like our product packaged in this kind of way, but we also understand the impact of that packaging to the environment. So how can we try and make this sustainable? And for Coke, it has been recycling and waste management. How can we improve this? How can we even set targets to the effect that every bottle that leaves, I think it's Coca-Cola beverages, comes back? How can we do that? And now that's what leads to innovation. It also leads to creating spaces and opportunities for other people and engaging with this other people to make sure that we have this and we bring it back. And we also try and make our processes even more and more efficient, which means that if you're competing, let's say, with another beverages company, which is not doing whatever you're doing, you're actually competing more effectively because you're recycling a product which you can reuse and reuse again, instead of getting products out to the market again and then spending on that. So I'm not acquiring and making bottles anymore. I'm using the bottles that I've already made, and I'm reusing them and taking back to the consumers. And everyone is happy. We've created more jobs, so we are impacting society. The consumer is happy that you have programs which are making sure that I can drink the soda, but I know if I dispose of this bottle, that I'm not going to create waste and that would impact the environment. So it really is that. One, if I can just summarize that, one, understanding what your gaps are in terms of S. Two, creating a plan for implementing that. Three, monitoring and evaluation. Four, reporting, because reporting comes with accountability.
Absolutely. Well, let me tell you, that is so clear. And I hope that companies now have a clear understanding of how the S aspect is their it actually is more of what builds their business. Because without the S aspect in ESG, then it means that you do not understand what the community and what responsibility, because I know like right now in Kenya, they've been the implementation of the climate action policies and laws are they're still not there yet. But there's producer responsibility policy that is there. So companies need to be really responsible. Like you said, they need to have a clear gateway of what it is that they're doing in their business. So that they're able to make sure that you will not attract investors and you'll not attract business if you're not doing business the right way. And you're not taking into accountability how the social aspect plays a major role, because consumer responsibility, like when we're talking about data protection, we're not just talking about the internet. We're talking about every aspect of data that is collected by your company.
Exactly.
Every aspect of it.
Exactly.
All right. So right about now, we're going to take a very short break. And then when we come back, we'll continue this discussion. And I really hope that you're really getting the nuggets about the S aspect and how important it is for you to ensure that you're compliant with the ESG policies in the country. We are going to be talking about how to Kenyanize this, man. How we need to Kenyanize these policies so that, and I'm not even talking about Africanize it. I think we need to start locally because we are still implementing policies from the international regulatory platforms. But how do we now, I know the stakeholders were really trying to bring it home, but what else can we do? So that is what we're going to be discussing right after this short break. Remember to catch remember to catch this discussion on www.iconradio.co.ke. That is the live stream, and on our social media platforms. We are continue talking to us. We are talking about the S aspect in the ESG, and we want to know the regulations and the Kenyan companies that. The Kenyan policies. Almost lost myself there. So thank you so much. So let's talk after this short break. That is SWV with a song right here on Icon Radio, your number one entertainment plug. And we are super glad that you could join us this Wednesday morning. And our guest today is on fire. This is because we are, like I always say, Sustainability Connect is not an entertainment show. We are not here to, we'll play for you music to just give you like a small break. But we are here to educate the masses about the importance of sustainability in corporations, in startups, in SMEs. So even if you hear something being repeated, it's for your own good. We want you to understand what are the laws? What is the most important thing that you need to adapt as a sustainability, so that when you're drawing up your sustainability plan for the year, you have an inkling of what you're supposed to be doing. So we are here to teach you, to educate you, and to train you on the best practices of ESG. So thank you so much, Julie. You're very you are very wise, if I may say. And you're very knowledgeable when it comes to matters ESG. And I love how you're breaking it down for our listeners to just understand why the S aspect is the most crucial, the most important in the market. And I hope that our listeners understand that, this is now a regulation. Like if you're setting up your business, or if you're already running your business, or your company is already running, or if you're a big institution in the country or a big organization, ESG is mandatory. Like you need to start reporting on what it is that you're doing. And we're going to be also be talking about emphasizing more about the reporting bit, so that we can understand how the reporting is done, where it needs to be reported to, who is being reported, like is there a monitor? We'll be talking about that. But first, before we go to that, let's talk about regulation. Regulation in the country is, from a lawyer's perspective, before I even say anything, what do you think about the regulations behind the ESG aspect in the country?
I think they're fantastic.
On paper?
No, because I interface with the law quite frequently. So it's not only on paper. And I think probably some of your guests may feel differently, but I've actually seen the impact of ESG related legislation. So maybe to focus on the S aspect of legislation. Of course, we have our constitution, which is quite vibrant, and we have our fundamental rights, our fundamental right, our constitutional rights, which now embody several aspects of human rights. So, of course, we can start with the basics, which are freedom from discrimination, and that has a lot of litigation behind it, both in the employment court, the constitutional court, all aspects of courts are there to the Constitution. You have the Employment Act, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which are very vibrant acts, to the extent that in Kenya we actually have our Employment and Labor Relations Court, which is dedicated to looking solely at employee matters. And that has just shifted how many businesses engage, because recruitment has to be fair and non-discriminatory, how they gauge employees on their performance, on the work and safety and health of employees, because now if you don't, you breach legislation and you have to pay. So it's going to the extent that now employers have insurance, either group life insurance or insurance and other work injuries benefits act, to protect their employees. So I'd say especially on employment law, we are doing very well. We're not like countries, and I'm sorry to say, like the US, where they're fighting over maternity, for example, maternity leave. It's actually a right in Kenya. You are entitled to 3 months. It's the law. And I've seen even companies that hire short-term employees, let's say for 3 or 2 months, they actually comply with it. So you'd engage an employee maybe on a 3-year contract, and they are already pregnant. So you can refuse to engage them because they're pregnant, unless it's an inherent requirement of the job that if you're pregnant, then there can be harm. But for example, one company I was conducting a due diligence on, tea picking. You can be pregnant and pick tea. So these are employees who are engaged when they're pregnant. 2 months into the contract, which is maybe a 3-month contract, 2 months into the contract, the employee gives birth, but under the law, she's entitled to maternity leave. So that means that the company has to pay for the 3 months. Yes.
Really?
Yes, it does happen. It does happen in Kenya.
So how, I mean, that is now where we come in and ask, how is this measured, man? Because, I mean, you're on a 3-month contract. And then you get pregnant. Actually, you give birth, not even get pregnant. You give birth during that 3 months. So the S aspect of it is now what is used to measure your dedication as a company in paying out.
Not paying out, on diversity.
Diversity.
And inclusion.
Oh, wow. So that is how they're clustering it.
Yeah. And it is not even how they're clustering or pitching it. It really is diversity and inclusion. Because that means if that company, and credit to our legislation, but that means if that company was not keen on diversity, then what its hiring strategy would only be men. Because men don't get pregnant. But because they want to include it for women and all kinds of women, and even women who are in various stages of their lives, it really works for them. And what does that mean? It means that, and I think studies have shown that if you do treat women well, especially during that period, they're more loyal to you, they're more productive, because now they have a stake in this business. They know, if I had my first child here and you supported me, I can have my second child and my third child, and I'll continue working very, very well and very, very hard for you. And what that now translates to is that you don't keep going back to the recruitment process looking for employees because of turnover. You do have very loyal employees. Maybe from a commercial sense, you may take a hit, but they'll come back. They'll come back.
All right. So now, when we're talking about this particular regulation, that is a constitution. That is basically what the law states. But now, how are there regulations that individual, like for individual companies, like can they draft their own policies, or do they have to be like driven by the constitution?
Not only the constitution, but their policies have to be driven by legislation. You can't write policies which are inconsistent with the law. It means that you are likely to breach the law, and that's going to lead to litigation or regulatory scrutiny or penalties. So it definitely has to be within the law, and that's why it's important to look and to also engage an ESG consultant or a legal consultant when you're looking at the S aspect. Because it's not only the Employment Act, you also have the Data Protection Act, the Consumer Protection Act, the Competition Act. All these acts fall under S. And if you're not complying with them, obviously, you will face legal sanction, which is a cost to your business and also a cost to your investors. You remember what I said in that? For investors, it makes sense to invest in companies which are ESG conscious and also S conscious, because it means it's a less risky investment. And fundamentally, having these kinds, complying with this regulation does make good business.
Yeah, it does.
It does make good businesses.
All right. So I know regulation is a bit is really deep, because I mean, what works for Coca-Cola is not what is working for us, maybe a small startup, because when Coca-Cola is thinking about consumer protection and data protection, what should the small SMEs be worried about when it comes to regulation?
In fact, I'll say,
or does it cut across?
It cuts across in terms of emphasis. I think I'd actually recommend start with getting the basics right. Yeah. And how do you get the basics right? It's just complying with existing legislation. So as you're starting your SME and you're engaging employees, you cannot possibly do it well if you're not considering the Employment Act. And it's such a basic. And now once you have the basics right, you can start building up on top of it. So make sure you're complying with different laws which affect your business. So, for example, if I am in trying to think of different kinds of companies. Okay, let's start with my law firm. Thinking of an example. So my law firm may be more keen on data protection than probably occupational safety and health. It's because I don't have people in a factory. I don't have, I'm trying to be sustainable, but in terms of creating a safe environment would be limiting how paper is, where paper is used. Is paper next to something that can be considered a hazard like fire? So my emphasis on occupation safety and health would probably be, let's look like we are creating a safe mental environment for my employees, more than a safe physical environment. And in terms of data protection, there's a huge emphasis because I'm taking a lot of data from my clients, different kinds of stakeholders. So I'm processing this data and I have to be aware of when I'm processing this data that I have to comply with data protection. But that can be very different for someone who's in manufacturing.
Yeah.
Their emphasis would be on creating a physically safe environment. And that's why I did mention that it's important for you to engage either a sustainability manager or an ESG consultant who'd tell you which areas should you emphasize on and how can you integrate these social aspects into your own business.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So regulation in Kenya, I mean, there's so many policies, there's so many laws. So for companies is to understand what is their baseline.
Yes.
Yeah. And for them to understand what laws and what policies affect them the most.
Yes.
Then they, like you said, start with the basics.
Yes.
The basics are just like it's a employee.
Yes. Well, when you go to a lawyer and you tell them, I'm starting a business.
Yeah.
Which laws should I comply with?
Yeah.
Very happy to tell you that. And in fact, I'm even seeing lawyers now offering, because initially what the problem was that it's too expensive to engage a lawyer.
It is. You guys are so expensive.
But lawyers are now even changing their billing structures such that I am aware, and even I offer specific services to SMEs. I'm just not thinking of you coming as a big corporate, but to an SME and to actually provide it at a rate which would be good for an SME, which still falls under S, which is to increase access and affordability.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. So those are the basics. But the moment you start focusing on ESG, just find out what are the basic laws, basic policies that affect your business.
Exactly.
And then just comply with that.
Just have that as a baseline.
Yeah.
And then we keep
building up.
improving on it.
When it now comes to, and I know we touched a bit on it about the reporting. So once you've complied with the law, and now you're moving up now, and you now want to start doing your reporting, how does that work? What is reporting?
Okay.
Let's start from there, because we're always hearing, sustainability reporting, and you're like, okay, so how does that work?
Okay. Now,
especially for the S aspect, considering it is very versatile, like there's so many components included in the S aspect. How do they start reporting? Who are they reporting to? I know the GRI index is it's a measurement.
Yes,
is an indicator. But how do we now start? Is it reports? I mean, how do we do that?
Okay. I think there are 3 questions there. Let me start with reporting and to whom are you reporting? Because that influences which kind of standard you'd be focusing on. So on
how many standards are there?
There are very many, but I'll only focus on 2 because those are the ones which have gained the most prominence and which I have seen that our country has been emphasizing on.
Okay.
So why are you reporting? Let's start with that. Why are you reporting? You may be required to report because this is increasingly becoming a funding requirement. We need to understand how your business is focusing on in terms of the environment, the society, and also what kind of governance structures are there. And as I say, this has been pushed a lot by investor funding because it makes it's less risky if we understand what your business is really doing and how it's impacting society. And
that is the why you're reporting.
That is why you would be reporting. But beyond investment, there are certain companies which will require you in terms of if we want to work with you, if we want to understand you, we require you to also have sustainability principles. So you also have to comply with ESG. So it's like catching a cold. An ESG company only wants to work with another ESG
compliant company.
Is ESG focused or conscious company. Why? Because it means in terms of our fundamentals, we already have things right. So one company which is causing a cold, I can say in Kenya, is Safaricom. Safaricom is ESG compliant and it wants its partners to be ESG compliant. So that's also another why. So it's not only your investors, but also some of your business partners who want you to be ESG compliant. But investors, I want us to not only think about Ps and VCs, but also banks are now requiring you to be ESG compliant if you do want to take credit. And that impacts a lot because most people, most businesses do need credit. And I was just reading.
Wow, the implementation of that.
Yeah. So for you to begin becoming ESG conscious, I think the next few years, you may not be able to get a loan as a business if you do not have some form of ESG reporting. So that's why who are you reporting to? To your investors, your business partners, and even out regulators. NSC, CME require listed companies to report on their ESG requirements. And of course, ESG includes the social aspect. And curious, I don't know whether last year you saw in the papers, in terms of equities sustainability reporting, it reported that it has a huge gender wage gap between employees, between its female employees and its male employees. So in the Kenyan market, it's up to 52%. And it also gives businesses a time to reflect on
their practices.
On their practices.
My goodness, that's 52% is a huge margin.
It is. And they reported it very openly. And I'm sure not only because of funding, but also their consumers. I mean, if I'm in equity, if I was an equity customer and I learned that this teller and this teller
are not getting the
same paycheck.
Yeah.
And I'm a woman.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing this female teller who's really helping me.
Yeah.
I'd really question, like, is this a bank I should be working in? I mean, it's more nuanced than that. But I think credit to them for
being
reporting
honest. Being honest, actually.
Reporting it and actually being honest about it. But it means that definitely they're looking internally on why is this the issue? What practices do we have? What kind of capacity and training do we need? Maybe we need to really evaluate how we are looking at performance.
Yeah.
And just looking at it a little bit more nuanced. And also understanding different markets, because apparently in Rwanda, it's not the same. So equity in Rwanda doesn't have the same issues as
in Kenya.
Yeah.
Wow.
So also appreciating the social and cultural dynamics behind it, but definitely time for reflection. And I think I've addressed who are we reporting to, why we are reporting. Now, what kinds of reporting mechanisms are there? There are two, as I say, that have gained the most prominence. That's the Global Reporting Initiative, which focuses on reporting to all stakeholders. I don't know whether you've had an opportunity to see Safaricom Sustainability report. Also equity. I think most of the listed companies focus on GRI.
Yeah.
And it's where we get to actually see what kind of practices they have. And it's where we would also hear the wage gap, because it's focusing on all stakeholders, as opposed to the standards, the sustainability accounting standards board standards.
That is sustainability.
SASB. SASB, which now influences investor decision making. So these are standards which are set out in a particular way to demonstrate to investors that we are complying with ESG. And it does have a lot of prominence in North America, so Canada, also the US, for those companies which are trying to be sustainable. Actually, ESG in US is very debatable, like climate change.
Yeah.
But those are the other kinds of standards. So I'd say for businesses, and particularly SMEs, when you're considering what standards to report, because now it can be one or the other.
They can be both.
I'm also thinking about, it can be both, but I'm also thinking about the resources you have, because you have to engage a consultant if you don't have a sustainability. So depending on your objectives, if your objective is, I want to understand how I can make my business more ESG compliant, because for me, it's not really only about doing good business and making a sustainable impact, but I also want to get funding. I'd say let's focus on SASB. Wow. If that's what you want, because the strategy of your business and where you want to be 5-6 years requires significant funding, I'd say let's focus on SASB. But if you want to focus on, like, I don't want to end up doing SASB, and then later on, Kenya adopts a legislative framework which is GRI related. So I need some consistency in my business, in my operations.
So that it becomes easier to transition
into. Let's do GRI. So for now, I'd say, because there's no one unifying regulatory framework, I'd want to understand what the objectives of the business are, so I can guide you on. If your focus of your business is on this, let's now apply the standard.
But we still insist people before profits. Like, no matter what your objectives are in business, I mean, people before profits.
Yes. Yes, I am for that. But I also know we live in a world where it really is about profits. I'm not doing I'm not doing business because I don't want to make money. I am in this to make money. But if I can make money and also
be conscious about
it, even the better. Even the better. But I want to be realistic. Maybe it's because I deal with the market and I deal with people, specific interests. Not everyone is coming to be Kumbaya. So, but the aim is that even if you're still profit driven, that you understand that being ESG compliant does make good business sense.
All right.
Ultimately.
All right. So, I mean, all this is so good, but there's so many challenges that come with trying to comply with the ESG aspect. And report is just making it easier for you to understand where the loopholes are and where to fix them and to work on that. But what are some of the challenges that, companies, and especially in the country, in Kenya, let's focus on Kenya especially, because it's still relatively quote-unquote new. What are some of the challenges that Kenyan companies are facing when trying to implement the S aspect of the ESG?
Yeah, there are very many challenges. I think first of all is an awareness. Why am I doing this and how do I do this? I think many of them are still
we're still stuck. Like, why are we even reporting to?
What frameworks do we use? This? So, and it's not only for companies that don't know about ESG. It's even for companies that know about ESG. So, for example, like multinationals, they have to localize whatever is coming from a global level. So if there's a company maybe which is American led and their focus on S maybe is diversity and inclusion and specifically on women. And their
People with
focus,
disabilities.
yes, and their focus is, as a company, we are now going to be giving maternity leave. Very, very extremely relevant in US because there's no paid maternity leave. I don't know why, but there's just
I mean, the concept is you paid by the hour. So
I don't know. Well, I'm not going to share my personal thoughts, but yes, they don't pay paid maternity leave.
yeah.
So if they say
These
we
are,
want
these
to
are some of the few, perks that Kenya should be really enjoying.
exactly.
Yeah.
So when you tell Kenya we want to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and now there'll be paid maternity leave.
Like, yeah.
We've been there, done that. We're
Yeah.
already doing it. In
Yeah.
fact, we have a law.
Yeah.
We can be subjected to.
And it's not just 3 months there. That's those of us who are like, there's 3 months and then we take our leave days.
Yes, exactly. It's exclusive of, you're
Yeah.
right, it's exclusive of your leave days.
Yeah.
So if you're telling Kenya, okay, do that,
Doesn't make sense.
the impact you're looking for in terms of diversity and inclusion, the impacts may be significant in that jurisdiction, but in Kenya, it has absolutely no increased impact, I think, in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you really have to think, in Kenya, how would we improve on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Does it mean maybe in Kenya, instead of having a maternity leave policy, it would be, let's look at our promotions. Are we having more
Or
women?
the wage.
Yeah, or the wage gap, actually.
Yeah.
And now focusing on that. So I'd say for more established companies, multinationals, it would be translating the relevance from a global arena now to a local one, so that there can be real impact. It's not something you can boast about, among other listed companies that you provide maternity leave. They all do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what impact are you really creating in the society? So that's one.
In a local context.
In the local context,
Yeah.
yes. So one is localizing. Now this is for companies that are aware of ESG. Reporting mechanisms still also an issue. Which framework, which reporting standards do I use? But I'll say increasingly, you'd either fall on GRI or SASB. That can inform it. But ultimately, culture and social barriers. We can't forget that we're not working in a vacuum. We're actually working in the real world. So you may try and implement some of these measures, but there's not enough impact, and it's because of culture. Just because the company is ESG conscious doesn't mean that there's no misogyny. Yeah?
Yeah.
So it will require a little bit more than it will require more than just reporting and all of that. Some of this will also include sensitization, training, capacity building to have the social impact that is desired. Finally, I think in terms of the barriers, S is the hardest aspect. Even when you have existing frameworks, it's the hardest aspect to measure. And it's because the regulation is scanty, it's all over. It's not being deliberate as opposed to E and G. Yeah, so E, you can all see they're now even using formulas like carbon credits.
Yeah.
Talked about. And it has more of an international what can I say, similarity, for lack of a better word,
Mm-hmm.
but internationally, it is becoming the same. Pollution is the same across the board.
Yeah.
Human rights differs with different societies
Mm-hmm.
because of their culture, because of their history, their laws, their constitution. Getting harmonized S
It's difficult.
is difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. So it doesn't mean that we are not working towards it. We should have worked towards it because consumers want you to work towards it. They want you to be faster at it. They don't want to be associated with products and services that don't respect human rights. There's no diversity inclusion. So it's just how to measure that impact that's becoming harder. That's a bit hard. But interestingly, and I was reading about this, I think 2 weeks ago, that profit companies are actually partnering with non-profit organizations and NGOs to try and show and demonstrate social impact. Why? Because NGOs and non-profits, a lot of time and focus is on measuring the social impact for funding. So you have to show, we did this and this was the result.
And we want more money
Yes.
so that we can continue doing this.
Exactly.
So that we can, the ripple effect is, maybe it all boils down to money.
It all boils down
Yeah.
to money. So some businesses, what they are trying to do is, instead of having our core business try and implement the social initiative at this time, it's to have maybe a foundation or subsidiaries which now work with non-for-profit businesses as they try and integrate and as they try to initiate and work on this, and then translating that now into our operations. Yeah. So it's incremental. We can't just change how we do business overnight, but these are the strategies that we are doing. And I think a good example may be Coke.
Yeah.
We started off. We
That
can
is our
change
benchmark today.
we cannot change our lines immediately and all.
Yeah.
But through these various foundations, subsidiaries, this is what we are doing, and we're integrating this into phases in our own businesses, and the impact is real.
It is.
Yeah, it's real.
It trickles down.
It trickles down.
Yeah. I think that is the easiest way. If you can't do it in-house, just collaborate with others and ensure that you're compliant by allowing other people to thrive.
Exactly.
Yeah. It becomes so much easier for even to report because you'd be like, this is what we've done. This is who we've partnered with. This is what they're doing on the ground. This is now how we are. Like, it becomes so easier. You focus on your core mandate, your core business practice, and then these others.
Yes, and I think incrementally, because you see, you're working with a non-for-profit whose main focus is on social impact.
Yeah, social. But
you keep thinking, how can we make this commercial?
Yeah.
And now you come up with innovation. And now that translates now back into the business. So we started off with waste management, and we have seen what we can do with maybe waste management, and now we can integrate it. We have the numbers. It's making so much sense.
Yeah.
We can now translate this back into the business. Yeah.
Okay. So right about now, we're going to take a very short break. I hope you're jotting down these nuggets of wisdom, because you're going to need them for your business. But when we come back, we're going to be talking about future trends, the future trends that, you foresee in the ESG, and especially the S aspect. And I hope that, this conversation is adapted into companies, because it is really important that they take this up and just understand. I think capacity building and training is something that a lot of companies need to invest in, so that they are aware of what ESG is all about,
Absolutely.
and then adapt all these principles, the policies that are required, it becomes so seamless for them because they've taken time to understand. Yeah. So thank you so much for being part of this conversation. This is Icon Radio, your number one entertainment plug. And we are super glad that today being Wednesday on Sustainability Connect, we are trying to decode the S bit of ESG. And I hope you're understanding now. Inaendelea kuwa simpler for you. And we've had different case studies, different examples of companies who are adapting that, especially in the country. We have Equity, you have Safaricom, Coca-Cola is on the trend. Like all these are big multinational companies. And we hope that even SMEs can just learn, that ESG is not for the multinationals, but it is literally for everyone to adapt. Yeah. So thank you, Julie, for that. And we'll continue this conversation after this short break. Remember, our socials are iconradio.co.ke, www.iconradio.co.ke. On social media, that is Instagram and Facebook is Icon Radio KE. And remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel. See you after the short break. That is Michael Jackson with the song Black on White, happening here on Icon Radio, your number one entertainment plug. And today being Wednesday, you know what we do. That is Sustainability Connect with me, your host, Wanjira Maganjo. And today we are talking about a very pertinent issue that every business and every startup and every organization needs to embrace. That is the S aspect of the ESG. And I know some of you have been hearing me talk about ESG, ESG, ESG. Do you know we have not even talked about what ESG means? What the acronym stands for. So Julie, maybe you can tell our listeners what ESG means in full, so that when you talk about the S aspect, they now know this is what we should have started with.
Exactly.
But now this is what we are ending with. But hey, this is how we do it. Yeah. So maybe you can just demystify what the ESG means.
All right.
And the S. Okay. Yeah.
So ESG are a set of principles which now influence how businesses are run and also how investors look into businesses that they're looking to invest or financing. So the E stands for environmental. So it focuses on the environmental aspects of the operations of a company. S on the social aspects, and G on the governance aspects. So today we are looking at S, which is a social dimension of ESG.
Now you understand why a lot of companies don't understand the ESG, because even for us, we just went and were like, we thought you guys know, so let's just move on.
Yes, but I'd
so sorry.
Probably I'd encourage listeners. We did have a show on ESG
before.
So please do try and listen to it.
Yeah.
Where we look at them more broadly.
Yeah.
But today we're just focusing on the S.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
Do not worry. So anyway, let's talk about future trends. Future trends in terms of what future trends do you see, in the integration of social aspects of into ESG frameworks in Kenya?
Okay. I see more investors requiring companies to be ESG compliant. I don't think that's going to change. So more institutional investors, as I said, I do believe banks are going to require businesses to be able to report on their compliance under ESG. I also predict that there's going to be a lot of regulation that's ESG focused, and also ESG unified. The question is whether the regulation will be more GRI or SASB. I think more regulators will be looking at regulation which focuses on GRI. The discussions are already there. EU has proposed a framework, and we are looking at EU because once the EU comes up with legislation, it usually translates to the rest of the world in different kinds of versions. So everyone is looking at EU, because they're very aggressive about innovative legislation, and we are likely to have stricter, neater, and tighter regulation, which would promote not only the S, but all of ESG. I also predict more technological advancements because of ESG. And this is because companies cannot continue doing the same things that they have been doing the same way without having technological input. And we can already see a lot of that, particularly in waste management or manufacturing companies. I do also predict that more professional associations become more vibrant and will focus a lot of what they do in ESG. So the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, already they have Ukamilifu, which is, I think, a very beautiful word. And Ukamilifu. So Kam is in uppercase. I see them being more focused on that because that's where investor money will go. Also KEPSA, and I'd like to say particularly for SMEs, this is another place where you can leverage on getting information and awareness. It's through these professional associations. So I see them being more vibrant in terms of that. I also predict more localization of the S aspects and seeing it a little bit more nuanced on ESG. At this point, the S aspect is very much investor-led, and there have been concerns about it being investor-led, and there's been a push to have SB more local, and even to have it diversified, especially in the startup phase. Can't remember that name. Perhaps you can. Or this company which came, I think, what they were trying to do was food delivery for kibandas. But do you remember that business model? Although the pitch made sense internationally, it just didn't make sense locally. What was the name? Kune.
Yeah, Kune. Kune.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that even started, that led to even discussions about the leadership in some of these tech startups, whether they're representative of the businesses which are running the countries there, been set up. So I see more questions on that. I see a huge push on that. And I think investor funding is trying to encourage a little bit more diversity and inclusion, because they are also coming to appreciate that if there's no diversity, then some of these business models just do not make sense in the markets that they want to operate in. So more localization, which means more diversity, equity, and inclusion in various spaces. And I genuinely believe it's not some buzz that's happening. Social enterprises were there before the pandemic. Funding was leading to social enterprises, and now what we're seeing up to the pandemic is we just don't want social enterprises. We want you to be more conscious on ESG. So in the next decade, I think it's only going to deepen. It may take a different kind of nuance, but I honestly believe the S aspect is only going to deepen, and it's going to be expected of almost all businesses in Kenya.
And the S aspect has so many components in it. So, like he was talking about, there's no one particular rule about the S. It has so many components in it.
So many.
So complying has to be compliance based on everything your company does that affects your business.
Yes.
Yeah. So Any other future trend that you foresee in the near future?
I think I've summed it up. We're going to have legislation, funding is going to follow that, and also there'll be a push, not only from investors and consumers, but generally the public to have more of the S aspects reflected in businesses.
All right. You know, it's easy to. It becomes easy to report. Like I love what you keep saying that, being ESG compliant just makes good business sense.
Yes.
Like just try and look at the regulations that are there. Like what policies, what can you just start with the basics? Start with the basics and adapt them into your company. And then from there, build up. And then it becomes easier that even by the time 4-5 years down the line, it will just be a matter of fixing what needs to be fixed because you already have a framework that is working for you internally and it makes more business sense for you anyway.
It does.
Yeah.
And maybe just to say it, it's easier for new entrants in the market to be ESG compliant because they have flexibility. There's a lot of scope for innovation rather than more established companies. It's quite difficult and it's also expensive to change how you operate overnight. And it requires significant investment, it requires significant time. And that's why I think it's especially crucial for SMEs to take ESG seriously because it's not a fad. It really is here to stay. I think there's a lot of scope now many businesses have to establishing ESG frameworks and strategies within their operations before it becomes a law. Because when it becomes a law,
then
there's
no
no
running away.
arguments. There's no please give me. It's you either do it or else.
Yeah.
So I think if you start off now, it's going to be better than waiting until your business is more established to implement it, because it's definitely going to be more costly.
So that is important because you can't do this alone.
No,
You need stakeholder
cannot.
engagement.
Yes.
So how important is stakeholder engagement in ensuring that, you're developing and implementing the social aspect in the ESG?
It's the most critical part of S. You can't implement S if you ignore your stakeholders. It just won't work. It could have worked maybe 20 years ago, but not anymore.
Yeah.
And I'll say this because millennials and Gen Zers are more socially conscious than boomers. In fact, I was reading statistics. I was reading statistics which showed that millennials and Gen Zers, in terms of the consumption of services, diversity, inclusion, all the various aspects of S, they're more conscious about that at 46% than boomers who are 2%.
Yeah, because it's every man for himself and God for us all when it comes to the millennials.
So,
but these ones are like, we want everybody included.
We want everyone.
We want our mental health space.
Exactly.
Like they're really conscious about.
They are extremely conscious, and I don't see how the next generations would be materially different, because the next generation are Generation Alpha, who have been brought up by...
I can't keep up, man.
Yeah, who have been brought up by millennials, who hold certain values and who actually have a direct stake, or if we are not ESG compliant, then they will feel the most impact. So stakeholder engagement, not only from a generational perspective, but it is critical in you trying to implement any ESG strategy. You cannot decide you're going to talk to your community, but not talk to your employees. Because your employees are your greatest resource. And if you don't take care of your employees, if you don't take care of the community, the public is still considering whether they should interface with your products and your services. I'll give an example of something that happened. I think it was about 1 month or 2 months ago. I took my junior associate and pupil for dinner. Part of it was just bonding with them, creating that rapport. But also, I felt they were doing a fairly decent job. So I told them, guys, let's go for dinner. We went for dinner. It's a fancy place, and wine was being served, and the options that were presented were, we went to give, there was wine from Israel, and they just became uncomfortable immediately. And they say,
Why?
we cannot support, we don't want to support, those are their words.
Yeah.
We don't want to support businesses from Israel because of what's happening presently.
Really?
So extremely conscious. So I think we wanted an option from South Africa, but they were very keen. We don't want. I mean, they're
Like
even
they're
thinking
so aware.
it's over here. It's not something they're only tweeting and supporting Palestine on. It's on everything. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So it's on everything. They just really
You wanna
genuinely
pick it
didn't want.
before it cracks?
please.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the kinds of consumers, and that's Gen Z.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
It's in everything.
And
So
you know, sometimes you assume like these people are so lazy, they do not know what's happening. They're not, like, they already know what is affecting them,
yeah.
and they know how to fight for their rights.
And I mean, it was dinner, it was casual, it was in the evening, but they're still socially invested consumers.
Yeah.
Even when they're out of the office. So it's not just a work thing for them.
Yeah.
It goes beyond.
Wow. That is amazing. So, I mean, when you talk about stakeholder engagement, like, let's give an example for a waste management company. Who are the right people? Like when they're talking about engagement, because you have to talk to literally everyone. You have to talk to CAM, you have to talk to, I don't know who, you have to talk to the
Regulators. Yeah.
So who in different industries, I know it's different regulators, but is there a cap, an umbrella where you say, like, this is where you're starting as a manufacturer or a startup, this is the one place that you need to start right at? Or is it still haphazard? They still know that one? Or should we send it to the ministry and the ministry, environment and
okay, now there's not one place you can just get data.
Yeah.
And it's not because of disorganization. Most of it is because, as you said, different industries have different peculiarities. But the good thing about professional associations, they're trying very hard to try and find what is relevant to you.
Yeah.
So for manufacturers, of course, there are different manufacturers with different emphasis, but at least if I'm a manufacturer, this is my baseline. Yeah. So it really does help to be in professional associations, and not only Apex, like CAM or KEPSA, but increasingly what I'm seeing, especially in the digital financial space, is that there seems to be, I think, 3 or 4 associations. So you have the FinTech Association of Kenya, then you have the Digital Financial, I think, Association of Kenya. I'm not sure that they do different things.
I wanted to ask, are they replicating, or are they doing something different?
Exactly.
Is it,
but I don't know whether even, I can't tell you because I'm not a member because of my profession. But I don't know whether what DFAC does and FinTech Kenya, FinTech, whether what they do is different, but it seems there's actually a space for both of them. So that must tell you that they're attracting different interests. But again, that's what would happen. So if you're in waste management, I'm sure because we are Kenyans.
There's
an
always
association.
there's an association.
There must be an
Yeah,
association.
the association
Maybe
that I know
even
is the
2 or
Clean
3.
Cooking Association.
Exactly.
And then there's a waste management something.
Exactly.
I mean, they're always there. So you just need to find your
group.
Yeah.
Because there you would also try and get information. And most of these associations, what they do is provide you with data.
Yeah.
So data as a market entrant, data as a person who's already in the market, and even data if you're trying to exit the market.
Yeah.
So that I think that would be most prudent to do at this time.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, also an ESG consultant or a sustainability manager if your business can afford it.
Oh, wow. So what's your final word to companies that are looking to integrate S in the ESG or just the whole ESG aspect?
Okay. The S, because of the sophistication of consumers, it's something you cannot ignore. It certainly isn't. And if you want investments or financing, it's also something you honestly cannot ignore. And I'd say sooner rather than later. Be compliant with the social aspects that affect your company. Get to know what those aspects are. Engage a consultant at Greenwave Kenya. I am a consultant, but so are my other partners, Grace Joki and Sharon Waringa. And we definitely can assist. If not us, then there are very many people in this space. They will definitely assist you. There are also sustainability experts. Some of them are focused maybe on E more than G or S. Some of them are broad-based, like Greenwave or other aspects. So even engage, like if your business can afford it, hire a sustainability manager. I do know for a fact most banks have sustainability departments to ensure that the entire business cycle and the entire business operations are sustainable and ESG focused and compliant. So that would be my parting shot. And as I usually say, if you're ESG conscious, that makes good business sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. That has been Julie Mulindi, a partner at JM Low. Oh, it's been such a wonderful afternoon. Morning into afternoon. And thank you so much for being part of this conversation and just helping us understand what ESG means, what why we need to be compliant about it, and also the S aspect being a crucial aspect, especially in the ESG forum. And I feel like this is a conversation that we'll continue having more, because you just can't teach math one day and then you understand it in one day. We have to continuously make that noise and just let the people know that, you know, this is our area of focus in terms of creating awareness. And we want to help businesses thrive by just understanding what policies are there, what practices they need to adapt, and how we can move from, you know, actually, before you leave, let me just ask you this. CSR and ESG, how different are they?
Yes. Good question. Very different. Extremely different. So corporate social responsibility is more broad-based, and it's about how a company can engage with its community. And it doesn't really need to relate to the business of the company. I think that's the main distinction.
It does not have to do anything with that business.
I don't have to create the social impact through the operations of my business or in how my business is structured. So I can have a very huge gender wage gap, and then I can go and plant trees. Saturday. Yeah. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But ESG is more dimensional. It's about looking at the operations of a company internally in terms of work safety, employee data protection, consumer protection. So internal factors would be employee related,
Mm-hmm.
and also diversity, equity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would be externally facing, about how is our how how is our company interfacing with consumer welfare,
Mm-hmm.
and that now falls under consumer protection and data protection. So I cannot say I'm creating a social impact if I don't respect my consumers' data, or even their safety and well-being in terms of the consumption of my services. And then it's even now broader, based with the community. How am I interfacing with the community? And it's not only an aspect of doing one social good. And I'm not going to discount the impact of CSR. I think it's been very good. I think many communities have benefited from
yeah.
that. But it's looking at the business it's looking at the ESG aspect is more impactful, because we're looking at the entire business, internally, externally, and generally. So that's the critical difference between CSR, which CSR is more external, and it can be on any project, but ESG is more dimensional, in requiring a business to have a positive impact.
So I feel, and I know for a fact, that ESG can help drive your CSR projects.
It does, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because now your CSR is
Now,
more focused, and your CSR is also more impactful when considered as against your business.
Awesome. Now, there's that clear distinction that we needed you guys to understand, because a lot of people have been complaining that, see, tunafanyanga CSR. Now you need to understand the distinction that there's one that is external, and then there's one that is internal, then moves into external. So thank you so much, Julie, for that. Thank you for being our in-house doctor of matters ESG.
Thank you.
And we know that this is a conversation that I think now next we're going to be focusing on the G aspect, because the environment, and I think we've planted so many trees, it becomes so easy for us to understand the E aspect. But there's also a way that we can help demystify it a little bit further. But we're now going to the G, probably into the next session, next time, when we invite you guys as Greenwave. So thank you so much for being part of this conversation, and we hope. Where can people find you, by the way?
Yes, they can find us on LinkedIn. And they can also find us, if you want to drop us an email, very easily, greenwavekenya@gmail.com. That's quite easy to remember. I can also be found on LinkedIn under Julie Mulindi. Sharon Waringa also on LinkedIn, Sharon Waringa. And last partner, Grace Njoki. She's also accessible on LinkedIn.
All right. Do not worry. I will tag them for you guys, just in case that you did not get that. But we thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And we know that for a fact that this is going to change a lot of, the mindset that we've been having as a society in terms of what ESG is all about, and why the buzz about it, and why investors are really keen on that in the market. So thank you so much. So this has been Sustainability Connect on Icon Radio. And, we have not been reading your SMSs, but we'll do that in time is not on our side. But thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And we hope to, have more conversations around it. So up until next week, Wednesday, thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you.